So, Mike, I've been thinking, how about we cover the Skywalker saga for the podcast at some point? A lot of people seem to really enjoy those films.
The original trilogy and the prequel trilogy? Sure.
Well, there's also the sequel trilogy, of course.
Dan, don't take this the wrong way, but does the sequel trilogy really count? I mean, George Lucas didn't write them. They technically don't even follow a Skywalker. And wait, what's going on? Is it just me or is it suddenly hot in here? Why do I feel so...
Uncomfortable? Flushed? Queasy?
Exactly.
It's called a hard stare. My aunt taught me how to do it when people had forgotten their manners.
Oh, give me strength.
Mike, trust me on this. If we're going to cover the Skywalker saga, we should cover all of the films. They all have something wonderful to offer.
You know what? You're right, Paddington. I mean, Dan. But before we get into Star Wars, I actually want to talk about one of my other favorite series of films. Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, our code is this: to make all nerdy things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. Hello there, I'm Mike, and I use he, him, his pronouns. You may know me as a producer on Gatecrashers. I'm also a dad and a higher education professional, and I really love the Paddington movies.
Hi, I'm Dan. I use he, him pronouns. I don't have a fancy introduction like that. You know, if you're listening to the podcast, you probably know who I am.
I felt like I had to because I haven't been on Gatecrashers yet, technically. So I was like, this warrants a reintroduction, right?
Oh, yeah, you haven't been on these episodes yet. Well, here we are. We're talking...
No, what are you talking about? You were on The Sopranos.
No, I said you. Me. No, I was in one.
Yeah.
No, I was in...
Yeah, you've been in a bunch. I have not been in any.
Okay, I've been in quite a few.
Yeah.
We're talking about one of your favorite movies ever.
Side note, I was going to be like, I know your memory is bad, but is it that bad? But yes, we are talking about one of my favorite movies ever, and I am not kidding when I say that it sits right up there with Empire Strikes Back and Rogue One and Spider-Man 1 with Willem Dafoe. It's right up there. And I'm going to come back to Spider-Man later.
I watched one last night, and literally before recording this, I watched the second one. You've been telling me to watch these forever, like since you've seen them.
Yeah. Which was a little late compared to when they came out, but yeah.
Yeah. These were absolutely incredible. But let's talk a little bit about kind of like the elevator pitch for Paddington. So Paddington first appeared in a children's book in 1958 called A Bear Called Paddington, written by Michael Bond and illustrated by Peggy Fortnum. Today, we're discussing the films Paddington 1 and Paddington 2, released in 2014 and 2017, respectively. In the first film, Paddington is a unique species of bear from darkest Peru, who learns English and travels to London to find a new home. When Paddington arrives in London, he meets the Brown family, who agrees to give Paddington a temporary place to stay.
So this was fun because you were the one, Dan, that suggested to me before we got into this to kind of like dive into the history of this a little bit with the book, because I saw the movies. I knew the books existed. I had never read one in my life. I think in the US, they didn't quite make it over here. But anyway, here's a little brief history on Paddington. So apparently one Christmas Eve, I think it was 1956. This is all in the foreword of like the first book of A Bear Called Paddington, written by the author himself writes all this. So it's great information. One Christmas Eve, writer Michael Bond entered a store to avoid some harsh cold weather outside. At this time, he had been stuck trying to find like a stocking stuffer Christmas gift for his wife. And as he was wandering through like a nearly abandoned toy aisle, just was empty that night, he came across a stuffed teddy bear sitting on a glass shelf. And so he brought the bear home, and he and his wife named it Paddington after a local mainline railway station in their area. And then cut to a spring morning in the following year, and Bond found himself just completely at a loss for writing ideas, sitting in front of his typewriter, and he looked around his room, and as his eyes set on the Paddington bear, he just started wondering what would happen if a bear randomly ended up at Paddington Station, lost and alone. And so he wrote a couple sentences, mostly just as an exercise to just like almost as if you were doodling on paper to try to kickstart your brain to draw some art. And he didn't intend to go any further than that, but he found himself compelled to continue, and hence the story A Bear Called Paddington came to be. So side note for writers, don't be afraid of trying those little silly exercises to get through a lack of ideas or writer's block. You might just come across an entire book series that gets turned into a wonderful set of movies. So Paddington is a character defined by his politeness, his innocence, and his desire to do the right thing whenever possible. In the few instances where Paddington does inflict his patented hard stares on others, it's usually just done to remind them of using their manners. Paddington always looks for the good in people wherever he can find it.
Some of the major themes in the films are kindness, tolerance, acceptance, found family, and loving thy neighbor.
And if you're wondering who might like this, literally anyone with even the tiniest fragment of a heart. Children, and I would say people who enjoy films with varied styles of comedy. I feel like there's that dry English humor in here. There's physical comedy. There's just funny facial expressions. There's just a little bit of everything, I feel like, for everybody. And it reminds me of the Lego movie in that way, that it's like there's a joke every 30 seconds and they're all different styles. So it's like the kids keep laughing, the adults keep laughing. It's just a great time.
And if you're looking to read the children's book, A Bear Called Paddington and the Other Paddington books, they're available at your local bookstores or libraries or Barnes & Noble, but support local if you can. Paddington, the 2014 film, is available to watch on Hulu. At the time of recording, we cannot find Paddington 2 on any streaming services unless you wish to rent it from YouTube, iTunes, etc.
So this is the part where I want to encourage everybody to keep the industry of owning media alive and just buy the Blu-rays. You're going to want to keep them and rewatch them. They're that good. So for adolescents and adults, the books might be a little bit of a simplistic place to start, which is part of the reason why we're talking about the movies today mostly. But at the same time, the books are still a great starting point for children of any age, at least from what I've read. I did read some of these last night, and it's just pretty difficult to go wrong. The movies are, I think they have a PG rating for I think it's labeled as innuendo, but it's so mild and passing. And Dan, I know you're not a great judge of what movies are good for children, but
yeah, I cannot think of one inappropriate thing in this movie.
Yeah, they're just so wholesome and pure. It's it's just hard to go wrong. Yeah.
So, go watch the Paddington movies. Just do it.
Yeah.
It's going to make your life a lot better. You're going to come out very happy on the other side. You'll probably cry, but not sad crying, wow, this is the best thing I've ever watched.
Yeah, I watched these movies, I almost went in totally blind. I think, I'd seen some pictures and things like that. And it was literally just that a bunch of film critique guys I watched on YouTube, all seemed to be talking about this movie. And I was like, okay, this isn't just another kids movie with an animated animal that talks. There's clearly something else here, because
isn't it one of the highest rated films of all time?
It's got Paddington 2, I think to this day still has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. No critic has given it a bad review.
It's basically the new Citizen Kane.
Yeah, it is.
But with a good guy and not a terrible monster.
And then in 30 years, David Fincher will do a movie about it, about the writer. Or no, not 30 years. What is that, 50 years? I don't know. When did Citizen Kane come out? And then when did Mank come out? Anyway.
Instead of Rosebud, he just kind of mumbles Marmalade and drops his the glass jar.
Yeah, exactly.
Marmalade. So we're going to talk about spoilers in the film. So go watch them, come back and listen to the second half.
Catch us after the break.
A young bear sent from his home one of the last of his kind. A strange name that humans cannot say.
I know where you're going with this.
A pure heart to do the right thing. Paddington is the best Superman movie there's ever been.
Yeah, right? Haven't I been making this point for years?
It's the best Superman movie.
Yeah.
Also, he's kind of like Spider-Man as well because his uncle dies. But
yeah. I can't take credit for coming up with that point on my own because the great Patrick Willems that has his film YouTube channel brought that same point up in his video about Paddington. But I have no problem just completely recycling it and just giving him the credit because it's
true.
It's absolutely true. It's and we'll get to it later, but like Paddington 2 especially is like the best Superman movie ever made. It's like exactly it's a perfect understanding of how to do a movie where the main character doesn't really have much of a character arc, but it's the effect he's got on everybody else that just makes it so great and just fun to watch. But we will get to Paddington 2.
So Paddington 1, first up, before we even get into like any of the actual themes or anything like that, he is a good looking bear. Like when he puts his head in the toilet at one point, trying to figure out how to use the bathroom, the fur looks it looks spectacular.
Yeah, it was just, I could not believe it. You know, sometimes you see these types of movies and you're just like, how is it that the budget that they're working with, they managed to make him look that good, but like, I don't know, sometimes like the Avengers don't even look right on screen, like in certain parts, you know what I mean? Like I still have this image of, I think it was in Civil War or Winter Soldier. No, it was Civil War, I think, where like somebody rolled onto a rooftop. I think it was Bucky. And it just like after jumping out of a plane or something, and it just looked like odd. Like it just, so I'll say this now because this was a point I was going to come back to later. The scene where Paddington becomes a window cleaner in the second movie, and he's working with like the bucket of water, and there's like a whole pulley system going. I want every CGI artist and video game developer to watch that scene to understand what gravity looks like, because there's too many computer animated things where it just doesn't look like there's enough weight to it, and somehow in this movie it just, like him working with that bucket of water and getting pulled up and down and everything, like it just looked like it had weight, the whole scene. And there's so much attention to detail in these movies. So I could go on forever and I'm going to have to continually like stop myself in the middle of all this. But it's just, they're so well crafted. They're so much more well crafted than they have any need or right to be, but they are. And it's like a wonderful miracle that these movies exist.
Yeah, and like even if some of it's silly, it's all like something that I really found in both of them is that every single piece of anything, like a one-off line or something, comes back. It's all there for a reason. Every single piece is perfectly utilized. I couldn't believe it.
The storytelling is so economical too. Like the on-screen storytelling. Like don't know. In both movies, I can't think of a single scene that shouldn't be there. They're all necessary. They all contribute something to this story. And they're dense. They're like, what, an hour and a half, an hour and 45-minute long movies? Like, they're not long. You know, it's just awesome to me that they managed to fit so much in there, and it doesn't feel overstuffed. It doesn't feel rushed. They're just fantastic little films. Yeah.
And it's like the balance of characters, like everyone gets an equal amount of like growth and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that one of the characters who is like stuck with me since watching the first one last night is Mr. Brown himself, like the father of the family, because normally in a film, like a children's film, if the father is trying to so basically he's like, I don't want Paddington. He doesn't want to deal with it. And it's not the normal story arc where it's like, oh, the dad's doing this because he thinks it's going to cost him money or it's going to annoy him.
I wrote in my notes, this is a movie about a dad who doesn't want a dog but gets one anyway and becomes attached to it, except the dog is a bear and he's bilingual.
Yeah, I think it's even more than that, though. I think it's the fact that it's not because he is afraid of like him destroying the house. Like he does call an insurance. He does insurance. That's his profession.
Right.
So it makes sense for him to do that. But he's not doing it for that reason. He's doing it because he cares so much about his children, and he explains that.
Right.
He's overprotective of his kids. Like he wants to give them the best.
Right. Yeah. He takes Paddington as like a dangerous stranger that could maybe not be trusted. You know what I mean? In his house.
Yeah. And he's not played off as like a mean dad. He's like, actually, it's because he cares.
It's genuine concern. Right.
Yes. And I think it's something you don't see a ton of in these types of movies. So it was nice to see like the dad isn't there is no bad guy in the immediate family. Like there's no.
Right. That's a good point.
The bad guy is the bad person. Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant.
Yes.
The father's arc is great, and I especially love the flashback scenes where we see him in his youth. Those are hilarious. Like
She's crazy about you, Daddy.
His motorcycle, and then they go and have the kids.
Oh
and they
my
come
God,
outside.
that scene, dude. So I know not every parent goes through exactly that, but I would maybe make the argument that every parent should be going through that when you have a kid. I know that I have thought many times in my life, I'm not sure if I could handle having a second child, because just having one is such a paranoid, scary experience when they're especially when they're very young, when they're infants, because it's like you just very quickly realize just how fragile human life is. And when they came out to the sandy colored station wagon, I was just like, oh my God, I feel this deep in my soul.
It's such like a well-written scene, especially because like they go through the turnstile door and then they come out and they're different.
It's almost like a one-shot take. It's meant to look that way. It's cool.
It's the whole, I cannot get over how well shot this entire movie was.
Yeah. So I'm very curious what influences Paul King, the director and co-writer of these movies, has, because one note I wrote, and I told you I was going to come back to Spider-Man 1 with Willem Dafoe. I noticed two things in Paddington 1. There's the scene when Paddington's using the facilities and it's flooding, and Mr. Brown comments because Mrs. Bird is creaking her knees, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "A storm's upon us." And he's like, "I can promise you it's not going to rain indoors." And then a drop of water falls from the ceiling in slow motion into his coffee mug or tea. And it drips in like slow motion, really close up. And as soon as I saw that, all I thought of was the one drop of blood falling from Peter Parker's arm that Norman Osborn hears because he's the Green Goblin and he can notice that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
In the Thanksgiving scene. So, and then later there's the scene where Mr. Brown has to, climb the outside of the building to get to Paddington and save him. And he almost falls and he catches himself, and then he thanks the gargoyle that's on the side of the building. And I thought of Aunt May thanking the gargoyle when she's hanging by her umbrella in Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock.
Yeah.
So I was like, is Paul King a Sam Raimi fan? Because I think he might be, because the direction of both scenes is so similar. And I was just like, I'm fine with it, but it's just funny to me. But he's also, there's a little bit of like Wes Anderson sprinkled throughout. There's a little bit of
I was
everything.
Thinking,
It has its own identity, but you can see all these little other influences sprinkled throughout. And they're just so wildly well done.
Yeah, I don't want to demean it by saying it's like a Wes Anderson film, but like it has some of those, like the color palette, especially in the second film with the prison, like the pinks. It reminded me of the Grand Budapest Hotel,
right?
But it's as you said, it's completely its own style. I think one of the biggest things that stuck out to me was in one when Paddington is looking for the Explorer, and he's like checking the names off the list.
The animated names.
Yeah, starting to get checked off above the city. Like that was like a very good way to tell that story instead of just showing us Paddington checking them all off.
Yeah. I wanted to make a little comment about, not that we have to go through chronologically, but one of my earlier notes was I just wrote, this is at the train station, the compassion of Sally Hawkins saves the day. Just that little moment of her just saying, wait, let me talk to this person, this bear, and understand, where he's coming from. Is he okay? Does he need help? And then connected to that, when they get home and Paddington mistakenly thinks that they're offering him this home, and then Mr. Brown, says, no, it's just for the night. And he said, we have to find you a proper guardian. And Mrs. Brown explains what that is, I think. And then Paddington says, so someone like you, but not you. And then Mr. Brown says, no, we don't do that. And I didn't think about this until the last time I rewatched this movie in preparation for this recording, that it's like, how much of a difference could we all make in the world if we this is going to get real sappy for a second, but like, how much of a difference could we all make in the world if we just took a second to question that statement? Like, no, we don't do that. Like, well, what if you did? Like, what if you did just decide to open your heart to somebody and help them out? Like, to whatever degree you can. Maybe you can't offer someone your home, right? But like, I found it a really powerful moment watching it the last time that I did, because I think it was watching it with Mr. Brown's character arc in mind. It's just such an amazing thing, because, you completely change the life of this person just by offering them a helping hand. And
yeah,
it's just a beautiful sentiment, and I didn't want to gloss over it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge thing, because it's not just they offered him this kindness, and in turn, he's helped change them too.
Right.
Like the first film ends with him spending time with his son building a rocket, like something that his son likes, but he was so afraid that it would hurt him.
Right.
Now he is the one indulging in the whole thing. But to that point, he's like, at the end of the first movie, he's like, okay, Paddington's a part of the family, but like, when I just want to call him the doctor, Peter Capaldi,
Mr. Curry,
Mr. Curry. The second one is like standing in the street trying to block him from going to get Paddington.
I love that scene much.
It's not even just him. It's the end. It's the end of Spider-Man 1 where New York is throwing garbage.
Yes.
at Green Goblin. That's their bear. Like, right. They love him.
Right.
And
in the second movie, when he's in prison, there's that scene where they revisit everyone in the neighborhood, and all of their lives are worse because he's not there.
Uh-huh.
Every single one of them. And it's such a great little montage of just, like the woman on the bike is just irritable because she hasn't had breakfast, and then the guy forgets his keys, and then the guy that he helps with the studying while he's doing the bins, like he doesn't, he can't multitask and do the bins and study at the same time. So then Mr. Curry's being, a jerk to him about it. It's just so great. And, the upside of all this is that because they took Paddington in, he doesn't have to go to an institution for young souls whose parents have sadly passed on.
That bit was so good.
I know.
Where like the first time it shows the orphanage, like, and then it takes the orphanage writing and just turns it into that. And It's just too long.
There's so many great, like, I don't know if you caught all of them, but there's so many great visual gags that you'll catch going back through. Like, there's a scene where Nicole Kidman picks up a stuffed squirrel instead of the phone, because she's got all the taxidermied squirrels. She like picks up the squirrel and then realizes, wait, that's not a phone, puts it back down, and then picks up the phone, but it's so quick. And then there's the scene where when Mr. Curry realizes what she's going to do with Paddington, and she's got the van and it says taxi because the door is open, but when she slides the door shut, then it says taxidermist.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so many little great visual gags like that. I love it.
When she goes into her secret lair, and so she goes in her secret lair, and it's the animals that are taxidermied on the one side of the wall, their butts are on the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
I was like, that is hilarious. I was like full on like burst into laughter because like that's such it's such a one-off thing they never show again, but it was so funny.
Speaking of one-off jokes that are like really freaking fast, when Paddington is narrating and he mentions how Judy is learning Chinese, and the translation goes, "I have been accused of insider training and require legal representation."
that was so like there's like adult humor, but it's not adult humor that's like,
it's not
that should be in
inappropriate.
a kid's movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And like the worst I can think that the movie gets in terms of like juvenile humor is literally just the moment when he's on the lifeboat and he's eaten all the marmalade, and he clearly looks like he's about to lean over so he can like pass gas, and instead the boat horn goes off. But it's like, that's it. Like, and they literally don't even play a fart noise. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's still even better than most other like toilet humor. It's like, the That's what I was trying to get across earlier. Like, you hit the nail on the head, but kids, adults can watch this and get enjoyment out of it. And it's not in that way that a lot of other movies are, where it's like, oh, they clearly just made a joke with like a sexual innuendo. And it's like, no, it's not really the adult humor, quote unquote, is just smart humor. Like it's I feel like I am a broken record just continually saying how well made these movies are, but I can't stop saying it because they are just so well done. Can we talk about Peter Capaldi's anonymous voice? This is an anonymous phone call. It's like so.
No, it's him.
He's so fantastic in these movies. Like, oh, speaking of points in the movie that are made for, adults to pick up on and not kids, I'll say it that way. Did you notice in the first movie, Peter Capaldi, when he first notices Paddington shows up in the neighborhood, as he's closing his window, he says, "Don't want to be kept up by your jungle music."
Yeah. I was like, geez.
And then in the second movie, he refers to him as an undesirable living in the neighborhood. I was like, holy cow. Like,
yeah.
I know that I can't remember if the director, Paul King, has stated if these movies were meant to be any kind of commentary on like immigration or anything like that, but like clearly they are, regardless, like whether or not it was intended. Like it clearly can read and work that way. And I think it's a great thing because it sends a really great message about how, like I think Mr. Brown says in that speech in the second movie, he says like, you made up your mind as soon as you saw him. Like you didn't even take the time to try to get to know him. And you just completely made up your mind when you saw him the first time and just stuck with that. And it's like, and I think the movie also does an important thing by showing that like, you never see Mr. Curry go, "Oh, you were right. I've been wrong." Because unfortunately, you just can't change some people's minds, right? But it's everybody else that Paddington affects that still has that positive outcome. It's I love these movies. Yeah,
they're incredible. What was I going to say? I didn't know Julie Walters.
Mrs. Bird, you mean?
Mrs. Bird was in Mamma Mia.
Oh yeah,
she's Rosie in Mamma Mia.
And Paddington's aunt and uncle are Michael Gambon and oh god, I just totally blanked on Amanda Staunton. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right. They're both from Harry Potter.
And I didn't realize she was Ron's mom.
Oh, right.
But the character that I knew was Mad-Eye Moody.
Right. Which is Knuckles.
Knuckles
McGinty with a capital N.
That whole story was that whole scene where he was like this angry person.
Yeah.
And it was really because he never thought he could do anything. Like,
oh my God.
Did he say my father?
So I totally just glossed over it the first couple times that I watched it. But when they dish out the marmalade sandwiches to everybody and then like he yells at everybody, he's like, 2 choices, take it or leave it. Paddington goes in and is like, "Are you okay?" And he's clearly so disheveled because he's so nervous about what they all think. But I never really caught the fact that he says, "My father always said I would amount to nothing." And he was right. And I was just like, oh my God. Like,
yeah,
it's a really deeply personal moment in a movie where like, I just feel like a lesser movie just wouldn't have had that line. You know what I mean? Like, and the way he delivers the line, like, it's like Oscar level acting. It's so good. Like, oh man.
The whole scene with them is hilarious. Like
right.
He is saying mean things about Paddington's aunt and Paddington gives him the hard stare, but it never they don't make him out to be a bad person. Like you clearly understand why he feels that way. Like his father told him he would never be anything. Right. So that's why he's been so angry his whole life. And Paddington, this character, is showing these people that they're worth something. And he does that through the entire thing.
Right.
So with the general or the sergeant, whoever lives down the street, when he's like, "Go away," he doesn't want to talk to anybody. And Paddington cleans his window.
The Colonel.
Yeah, Colonel.
Yeah.
And then Paddington cleans his window and like has the light shine in.
Yeah.
That like people are kind.
Like
and
that
then
vitamin D is good too.
Yeah. And then he sees the newspaper salesperson.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they have their little elevator escalator exchange.
Yeah.
Which is
so it's like just so genuine and wholesome. Like this whole movie, these movies are just so good.
Yeah. And there was something else I wanted to touch on with Knuckles, and I'm trying to remember what it was now. But
When he comes back,
well, that, yes, obviously. Knuckles' character arc is easily one of my favorite in both movies. He's just, oh man, it's just like I always love the line when he's like, what does he say? He's like, I feel a warm tingle in me tum tum.
yeah.
And then,
Or
by the way, when Paddington rubs the ketchup and the mustard into his apron, right? And then after that, when he, tastes the marmalade sandwich, and then he tells all the prisoners, like, Paddington's under my protection now. He calls them all yellow bellies, and then the camera cuts back, and his belly is literally yellow from the mustard.
Oh, I was like, why is he? I was too distracted by why he was talking like a pirate at that point.
Yeah, it's literally just
That
a gag.
makes sense.
It's literally just a gag because there's mustard all over his apron right where his stomach is. So he calls everyone yellow bellies, and then the camera cuts back, and his whole stomach is just yellow.
Wow.
That's the thing I'm saying. There's like, I can't. Quinn and I, my daughter and I, crack up at this scene so much. When I guess it's like the warden during the scene where when Paddington is doing that, like when he gets the ketchup all over him, when he says he gets on the walkie-talkie and he's like, send a medic, and then after I think Knuckles like breaks the rolling pin in half, and then he's like, forget the medic, send a priest.
I really liked when they were in the plane, all three of the escaped prisoners, and what does he say? I don't do nothing for no one for nothing.
Yeah.
And he says that, but then he looks out the window and you can see how sad he is.
Yeah. And then I can't remember the other guy's name. The guy with the real serious voice all the time. He's like, shouldn't we help him? And that's when he says, I don't do nothing for no one. And then he's like, yeah, but he's our friend. And it's just like this amazing moment because I don't think they ever had friends. Like, I don't think they ever thought of themselves as people that would do things for friends, because it's like, the difference between that scene and the scene where Paddington is opening the door for Knuckles to the kitchen and he's like, after you, and he's like, what? So you can stab me in the back? And he's like, no, because it's polite. And he's like, you were ahead of me, now you're behind. And it's like, that was the whole mentality. And then that's just Paddington being around just shifts all that to the point where it's like they go back to just help their friend. And it's just so similar to the first movie, right? Being like a under the radar immigration message. Like this one's clearly Paddington 2 is clearly a message about prison reform to me. Like, it doesn't help to let people just rot in a cell for 30 years. Like, it's you can do so much more to help rehabilitate people and make them better people. And it's,
I am trying hard not to say bad words in this episode.
Yeah.
I have a lot of feelings on prisons.
Yeah.
None of them are good.
Yeah.
It's something I think about a lot. But yeah, I can see exactly what this movie is like. I didn't even think of it in that way.
Right.
Wow.
I don't think I did on my first viewing either, but then after, I think, like I said, some of the film critique kind of channels I follow on YouTube, like a lot of them talked about it, and you just think about it more and you're like, wow, I mean, like literally it's the pink prison uniform gag is just a funny thing at first, but it literally brings color to the prison. Like the place looks so drab until that moment. And then by the end of it, they're decking the kitchen out with like desserts and ribbons on the walls and plants, and like everything just looks so nice. And obviously there's a level of like fantastical unrealism to that, right? Like obviously, prisons would not have maybe the budget to pull stuff like that off. But, at the heart of it, even though it's a joke that the warden's like reading a bedtime story to all of them over the intercom at one point, there's still some truth in all that, the thing about these movies, and I'm going to touch on this more later because I have like a wrap up point that I want to talk about when we're nearing the end, but like Paddington never gives up hope in people that he can find some good in there somewhere. And I think it's a large part of the reason that these movies sit on the same level as like Star Wars for me, because he's a lot like Luke Skywalker in that way. Like he just just does not want to give up on the idea that there's some good to be found in somebody. And it doesn't matter how deeply it's been buried over the years, like someone for like Knuckles, right? Like you can still find it. What?
Unless you're his nephew. Yeah, but I totally agree. I think the thing about prisons in general is that the entire goal of them is to dehumanize people, and that's the profit and dehumanize. But in this, Paddington, the entire point of Paddington is to humanize things, to give them their identity back.
Yeah.
And things like that. They just kind of wholesome. Like, everyone is worth something. You just have to take the time to either help them find their way or like take a moment to understand who they are.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's a major running theme throughout both of these.
So one thing that's tangentially related to me to the prison reform idea, and I didn't think about this until the last time I watched it. Paddington gets 10 years for shoplifting.
Wow, he really does.
Yeah, and I didn't even catch this line until literally last night. And grievous barbarly harm, because he cut the guy's hair bad. I never noticed that line until last night. I always thought he said bodily harm, but then like just ignored it because I'm like, wait, he didn't hurt anybody. You know what I mean? But no, he said grievous barbarly harm, and I think that's a joke at the barbershop, like him cutting his hair badly.
That whole scene was hilarious.
But tangentially related to the prison reform thing, it's like that's an issue with our justice system, right? Like, would Paddington have gotten 10 years if he didn't look like a bear? Probably not.
But I do want to talk about the bear thing because it stuck out in both movies. I absolutely adore the fact that he doesn't show up to London and people are like, oh, there's a talking bear.
Right.
That isn't the thing. It's him getting used to the real world, not the real world getting used to him. And I think that is so much better than like if the movie was like, oh my God, a talking bear. It's more like, this is someone who's never been to like society. He lived in darkest Peru. Right.
Literally the only line that I could find in any of the movies where anybody really comments on him being a bear in that way are when they first meet him, Jonathan off to the side says, I didn't know bears could talk or something like that. And then, Paddington just very briefly says, yeah, well, I'm a very special kind of bear. There aren't many of me left. And then, and this is a note that I had because I love this freaking joke so much. It's such a dry joke, but when Sally Hawkins goes to the police station and is describing Paddington, and she's like, he's about 3'6", he's got a blue duffel coat and a red hat. Oh, and he's a bear. And the guy goes, it's not much to go on.
Not much to go on. And she's like,
what?
I love Sally Hawkins.
Oh, that's another thing I could go on about forever. Like the scene where she's just sitting on the bed, like musing about the popping book and it being like a treasure map in the second movie, and how she just kind of like stares off into the distance with this like fantastical look in her eyes. Like she's so inescapably charming. Like you cannot get away from how good Sally Hawkins is in anything, let alone the Paddington movies. But in these, she's so wonderful. Like the scene where she first meets Tony for the first time with Judy, and she just can't contain herself. It was just so adorable. And oh man,
I'm a big fan of Sally Hawkins.
Yes. She's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the villains? Because we have not talked about Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant enough. And I feel like they both deserve so much like speech time here because they're both so fantastic. Hugh Grant is in like the role of his life. Like
he's so funny.
He's so good. And there's just, oh my gosh. So one funny thing I noticed with Nicole Kidman that I hadn't thought about when I first watched the movie is there are two separate scenes in the first movie where she sneaks into a room like Ethan Hunt. And I just find that funny because she literally dated Tom Cruise.
Oh, yeah. She did.
At a point in time when that happened. I don't even know how I remembered that because
don't they play the Mission Impossible?
So they play it when Paddington does the vacuum gag, and Ethan and I were talking about this. Not Ethan Hunt, our Ethan. Two great Ethans. Because we were talking about how Ethan mentioned how everybody does the Mission Impossible 1 gag. You know what I mean? And they did that in this movie, but that's not when they used the theme song. They used it with the climbing gag instead, even though everyone uses the Mission Impossible 1 gag. So it was like a nice change of pace there.
The thing I've seen, it's wild. The thing that I've seen Nicole Kidman in the most recently is Big Little Lies, which is the HBO show where it's like the most powerful performance I've ever seen. Like it was
of hers or just period
hers.
Okay.
It's like, it is very rough. But then coming to this to see how she can do drama and then comedy this well.
Yeah.
And she's not even, her character is not funny. Like she is not, but she plays it so well that every bit is hilarious.
Can we talk about the hello moment when Mr. Curry sees her at the phone booth?
Yes. I think the ending with her is my favorite.
Looking for. Sorry.
What does he call her? Honeypot?
Honeypot, yeah. She's like, I am not your honeypot.
You're a honeypot. When she's on the roof about to shoot them,
and Mrs. Bird opens the hatch.
Mrs. Bird, that entire scene with her going to the guard and out
just
drinking him
under the table.
Was hilarious.
She's like, where's your fighting spirit? Like,
I was like, I love her.
She's fantastic. Yeah, and then the with the honeypot thing, it's something you don't think about when you watch the movie, but you're like, the movie casually does that as a means to avoid the spoiler that she's Montgomery Clyde's daughter, right?
Oh yeah, daughter.
Not granddaughter. Yeah, because that otherwise she doesn't have a name up till the point that Paddington meets her. So that's how they get around that, is just by Mr. Curry wanted to come up with goofy code names. And that way there's some way to refer to her and people have a reference point. But yeah, they don't mention her name up until that point, I don't think. Unless they mention her first name. I think I think all the guards just call her director up to that point. Like,
that makes sense.
Yeah. I do want to stay on the villains, but real quick, I was looking at my notes and I do want to touch on, no, not Mr. Giuseppe. That's the barber. The antique shop.
Oh my God. The war story?
Yeah.
That he got sent over from
Germany? So apparently, I can't remember if this is something that Michael Bond, the writer, has specifically said or if it's just implied by a lot of people. But I think there's an idea that he was influenced by like refugees in the war when he wrote this story. Hence the Sally Hawkins' whole, Mrs. Brown's bit about Aunt Lucy's bit about, sending the children over just with the tags, that say, please, like in this case, it was, please look after this bear. Thank you. But yeah, it's just so powerful. Those kind of little things that they sprinkle throughout. And,
so before we talk about Hugh Grant,
Mr. Gruber, that was the name I was looking for. I could not remember it. I just wanted to touch on him because he's so lovely. He's just so funny and entertaining.
I'm sitting here blown away because Paul King directed 2 of my favorite episodes of The Mighty Boosh. He directed Old Greg, which if you've seen Old Greg,
I have.
Is
it's been a while.
Nothing like
this.
Nothing like Paddington.
I did not know he directed that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that is wild.
And so
he directed a lot of the Mighty Boosh, 20 episodes.
And so here's the thing, right? He is the director tapped to do this next Willy Wonka remake. And I'm normally not all about let's do a million more remakes. But if somebody was going to do a Willy Wonka remake, I'd gladly give it to him. Because you look at the color palette in these movies and just the deft execution of everything. And I'm just like,
I mean, I wouldn't call it a remake because it's based on a book. Like, how many Bibles have they made?
That's true. It's more of a reimagining than a remake, I guess, right? Or something like that.
They reimagine the Bible every 100 years. It's the same thing.
But yeah,
who's the writer of? Is it Dalt? Is that person who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
No, it's not Roald Dahl, is it? Or is it Roald Dahl?
I'm trying to type it up without my keyboard making too much noise.
I got it. Yeah, it's Roald Dahl. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah. Those books are like learning some of what actually happens in those books is wild.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll go see it just because Paul King's doing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll see anything Paul King does now.
Yeah,
that's it.
Exactly. He's on that list for me now. Yeah. But so Hugh Grant. We have to get on and touch on Hugh Grant's character.
Yes, Hugh Grant.
Phoenix Buchanan is insane. The scene where he's talking to all the different versions of himself in character.
I love it. He's talking to Hamlet and Macbeth, and
oh my gosh,
he's wild. The costumes are hilarious.
Yes, they're fantastic, and the fact that the nun outfit is reversible to being a bishop's outfit. When he's leaving, and wait, we have to touch on the security guard because I just love the scene where he goes, "I set off at lightning speed," and then he's just sipping his tea, walking quickly. There's an unusually attractive nun. It's so great. Oh man. But yeah, so Phoenix Buchanan.
There's also the scene where he's dressed as the dog.
The dog food commercial.
In the dog commercial
Din-dins.
is absolutely hilarious. Yeah. Where he is legit just wearing a
dog costume.
A golden retriever costume.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
The amount of things that they managed to just get Hugh Grant to do, and some of the writing in the second movie, especially some of the lines that he gets to say, when you first see him at the fair, and he says, "I am tickled the deepest shade of shrimp." I'm like, who writes that?
It's so good.
And then he says something when they're in the court, and he's got to swear that he's telling the truth and all that. And he's like, "Let my entrails be plucked forth and wound about my neck, if he lies," or whatever. I'm just like, what? It's a kid's movie.
He's so extra.
And how he brings Mrs. Brown in because he says he wants to hear about the investigation, but then he just starts going off about his one-act play.
Yes.
And and on this furniture, there's just all these glamour shots of a young Hugh Grant.
It was so good. The whole thing was just so good.
Nice buns, by the way. Yeah. Really nice buns. And the movie has a train chase scene. It's
awesome.
And it's the
train chase is incredible.
It's so good. Also, Paddington yelling when he realizes that the tunnel's coming up, and it's this high-pitched yell that you just don't expect to come out of his mouth.
Yeah. And then he does the Neo thing where he does the backwards bend.
And then he comes up and there's all the smoke in his face and everything, and he's got to cough it away. Oh my gosh.
And then when Mr. Brown is trying to get from one train to the other, and he's practicing his yoga meditation.
Open your mind and your legs will follow. But that's exactly what you were talking about earlier. Every little one-off joke comes back. Every one of them.
Everything has a purpose.
It's such a perfect example of economical storytelling. Just nothing is wasted at all. Oh boy. I love these movies so much.
Yeah, it's incredible.
My name's not J-Dog. It's Jonathan Brown, and I like steam trains.
Steam trains. I don't really want them to make another one.
I don't either, because I don't know if you're aware. I think I may have mentioned this before, but Paul King is apparently not attached to direct the third one, and he's apparently involved to some degree, I guess consulting or whatever. I think I don't know I can't remember his name. The guy that plays the security guard actually co-wrote the second movie.
Really?
Yeah. And Ethan was mentioning this with me, that apparently he's very well known in those parts. And I think if they can keep him on board as a writer, then maybe it'll manage to stay consistent quality, hopefully. But I just don't know who's going to direct it like Paul King. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know because here's the thing, right? I don't want a situation, where somebody tries to impersonate Paul King's directing style.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, if it's like wildly different, I just don't know how that'll be.
He was Blue 5.
Right.
And Rogue One. Yeah.
So I'm just very curious to see how it plays out, but I would be totally happy. Here's the other Sam Raimi comparison I'll make. I don't want it to be Spider-Man 3.
Where they put three villains in?
Yeah.
You think Paddington needs 3 villains?
At the same time, now that you say that, I'm like, who could they get to play the 3 villains? Because the movie has such great villains to begin with that if they could somehow pull off 3 great villains, I just wonder who they'd cast for it.
I wish that the Christopher Robin was as good as
this.
Yeah,
so a couple of years ago, you were like, you need to watch Christopher Robin because it made me so like emotional and it was great. And I watched it and I told you I was kind of like let down. It wasn't a bad movie. I just didn't feel it the way that you did. And I think it's because I had already watched these. Yeah, and they're just so much, it's what I wanted Christopher Robin to be. Exactly. It's wholesome. It's got this wonderful message at the center of it, but it's executed better. Like, I liked what Christopher Robin was trying to do. I just don't feel like it did it as well.
No.
Oh, man. Oh, also, little fun fact. The author of the series, Michael Bond, is actually cameoed in the movie. When Paddington comes to London and he's taking the taxi route and they play the London is the Place to Be song with the band, he's just one single man drinking like a cup of tea in a restaurant and he waves through the window. And that's him. So they just like put him in the movie, which is another thing I love about this movie is that I didn't touch on this at all earlier when I was going over the history, but I did try to read through at least like the first couple chapters of the book last night because it's actually somewhat lengthy for a children's book. There's so much intact from the book. Like, him showing up at the train station is in the book. His Aunt Lucy being in the home for retired bears is in the book. The family is not the same exactly, but pretty similar. Like, it's still the Browns, Judy's. I know they mentioned Judy. I don't know if they mentioned Jonathan. But I'm sure Mrs. Bird is in there. It's nice to see a movie that's this well done and also manages to respect the source material at the same time. I feel like that's so hard to do because a lot of times when you translate something from a book into a movie, like Steven Spielberg with Jurassic Park, right? Like, he had to make changes because nobody's going to watch an hour-long intro about genetic science. You know what I mean? Like,
I need to talk about something.
Yeah.
Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
You know him?
Yeah.
You know that the guy who wrote Jurassic Park? 6'9". He was 6'9". That is how tall he was.
Wow.
He, like, I don't know. I think it was on TikTok this morning. He is taller than Michael Jordan. Like, I don't
crazy.
know. I mean, it's just how he is. But like, finding that out was a lot. It's like Jim Shooter is 6'7" and a smidge.
I don't remember who that is.
He writes a lot of comics. He wrote the Legion of Superheroes. Okay. He's a huge Marvel. I'm pretty sure he was the reason the Transformers have a story. Lots of stuff. But in an official Marvel handbook where like they have him as a character, it is 6'7" and a smidge is how tall he is.
Well, I'm 5'7" and a smidge, so he's got a foot on me.
My God. Sorry, that was something that's been on my mind all day.
It's fine. That's the wonderful freedom of podcasting is that we don't have any kind of weird restrictions for time or anything. We just throw stuff like that in there. Why not?
Now people know.
Yeah.
He also wrote Westworld.
Yeah, but I mean, it's stuff like that or like Ready Player One, like changes have to be made to make it a entertaining enough film, right? Like Jurassic Park, I never finished the book because I literally could not get through the, I don't know, first 100 odd pages where they're just talking about like genetic manipulation and they're like really deep in the science of it. And I'm like, I'm pretty interested in science, but like that's a lot to just read in a book.
Not a nerd.
Yeah. I mean, I am, but so I mean, it's awesome that maybe it's a testament to Michael Bond's writing as well, that there was enough there for them to make 2 movies out of it that don't really diverge, from what I can tell, from the source material too much. And it's just as charming and wonderful, and just the fact that at the center of it all, it's just a story about being kind, loving your neighbor, like,
yeah, it's about being nice,
just being a good person. But I want to make an important distinction here, right? I think there's a difference between kindness and niceness. You can be nice, but it can be like a surface level thing, right? Like, you say nice things, but like underneath that, you're not really feeling that, you know? There can be like a fakeness to that. And I feel like that's the difference with Paddington, is that he's not nice to people just to seem nice. He's nice because he actually wants to make a positive impact on people and make them feel valued.
Yeah.
And it's so deep. It runs so deep for him. Like, and it's just, and I love that there doesn't have to be any explanation of how he understands that, right? Like, other than Aunt Lucy taught him. But like, how does Aunt Lucy know it? It doesn't matter. She's just like what God should be, right? Like, she's just this like perfect beacon that he just follows. And it's just so wonderful. Oh my gosh, I love these movies.
Yeah, they really are. They're just fantastic.
Yeah. I want to live. I'll say this. You know that I'm like thinking about house buying in the future, right? And like, as badly as I want a single family home so that I've got like separated space, and if I want to own a drum set, I can and whatnot. I want to live in Windsor Gardens. Like, I don't care that they're all like townhouses and everything. And it's so pretty. Like, going back to like the kind of Wes Anderson color palette of the whole thing. It's so pretty, that little road. Like, when they're outside having like a snowball fight, it just looks so, it's very romanticized. Like, I don't, I'm sure it's not like that. You know what I mean? To live in that area.
It's raining. It's always raining.
Well, yeah, that too. And then like, something I noticed watching the second movie is when they first go to the fair, I was like, holy crap, I really want to socialize with people. like I was just watching all these people walking around, and I'm like, God, that hit like a ton of bricks. Like, I just miss seeing people so much.
Yeah. What did you say you wanted your final point to be?
So I literally wrote this down because I felt like I needed to say this, and I wanted to get it out in a way that hopefully wasn't too clumsy, even though I didn't want it to sound scripted. But just because these movies mean so much to me, I just wanted to say Paddington, quite simply, cares so much about being a good person, about being decent to everyone he meets, no matter who they are. These films are so earnest, endearing, and wholesome, it's astonishing that they even exist at all. As a father, it makes me glad that my daughter has stories like this to learn about tolerance and kindness. And as an individual, it's a wonderful reminder of the impact you can have on people in your day-to-day life. It takes so much less energy to be kind to people than it does to be hateful or disrespectful. I can't overstate how deeply Paddington resonates with me for this reason. We can all learn a lot from Aunt Lucy.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess we can end the episode there and just... Yeah, can't really top that. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Gate Crashers. I got nothing to add. That was perfect.
All right. Well, where can people find us?
You can find us on the internet at gatecrashers.fan. You can find us on the Twitter at gatecrasherspod, and on Instagram the same. You can catch us again next week, and we'll talk to you soon.
And remember, if we're kind and polite, the world will be right.
The Gate Crashers.